There are people incarcerated in our prisons who have been convicted of nothing, not because they're remandees, but because they've been found to be mentally unsound, which is Section 260 of the Criminal Law Consolidation Act. Some of those people find themselves housed in G Division, which is the unit for recalcitrant prisoners and protectees. Perhaps I'll ask the Attorney first. Is that humane?
Well, look, this is we're talking about 262 or 261? What do we call it? Which section are we talking about? 260. Mental impairment. Well, look, this is a very complex area, it's a very important area. I've had the Sentencing Council, which is convened under the chairmanship of former Justice Kevin Duggan, working on this. We put out a discussion paper on this, I think, 2 months ago, or thereabouts. And it's a very, very learned piece of work, a very excellent piece of work. And if we're re-elected, there will be reform of that, because it is inevitable, having regard to the material contained in that needs to be looked at. So that's one part of the answer. Second bit is there is a small group of people who are suitable only for accommodation in James Nash House. That will always be a very small group of people, and some of them are pretty well permanent, others are cycling through the place. And then there's the general issue of mental health within the prison population, which is a complex issue again. Incidents of substance abuse, illiteracy, mental health problems are dramatically higher in the prison population than the general population. I do think that's something we have to look at, but there's no simple magic bullet to solve that particular problem.
Ms. Wade? The government announced, I'll get the year wrong, but I think it was 2007, 2008, the new prison, and there was going to be an expansion of the number of forensic mental health beds. So the government at that stage recognised the need. They cancelled it. They cancelled the project. The AMA made a point in 2012. They said this: the prison population has nearly trebled since James Nash opened in 1987. While James Nash bed numbers have not altered from the 30 beds it has on site and an extra 10 beds at Leenside, the waiting list to gain access to James Nash is unworkable, with most being denied the central hospitalisation for excessive periods. Dr. Sharley, who was the president at that time, says, unfortunately, it's the most shocking deficiency in health I've seen since I moved a remote Indigenous camp. I visited a remote Indigenous camp in the Northern Territory some years ago. I believe forensic mental health in South Australia is lagging behind the rest of the country and indeed the modern world. The statement concludes that at that stage was 30 beds at James Nash and 10 at Glenside. They thought that there was a need for 60. I just make the point that of course it's a long-term problem, but the government again, the prison estate is not meeting the challenge. I also don't think it stops at those that need to be detained in James Nash House. There are plenty of prisoners in the prison population who have mental health issues, and I recall that not the current public advocate, but I think the public advocate about 2 or 3 years ago called for an intellectual disability unit within prisons. People with disabilities still have to face the consequences of their criminal behaviour, but they also deserve to be housed in
All right. Well, you told us the problem. What's a good government do?
Well, over time you do plan to improve the prison estate. But part of that is making sure that you've got appropriate specialist facilities. And to give credit where it's due, the government has invested in expanding the prison estate. I might get the numbers wrong, but I think there's a 96-bed unit at Port Augusta Hospital. That's right, Port Augusta Prison. But it's a high security unit. I'm not aware of any investment in the 12 years of this government. Except for the 10 beds at Glenside, it's not actually in the prison estate. That's in the health estate. But I'd be interested in if anybody can think of any investment in the prison estate in the last 12 years to address those with, shall we say, special needs.
Can I just say, I understand that there was an approval, and I think it's underway for an additional 24 places out there at James Nash, which were the idea of being a step down or something of that nature. Now, I'd have to get the statistics, so we're getting into real detail here. There has been a recognition of those things, and they are complex problems. And also, people might be aware here, there is a philosophical issue here, which I don't think it has a correct answer, but it's a matter of quite contest as to whether these people should be observed through the prism of corrections or through the prism of a medical issue. And that has sort of a centrifugal effect at the very core of this conversation, because it's difficult to get anybody to agree even on that, let alone how you go about doing it. Yes.
Helen Mayes, Assistant Public Advocate. We have expressed the need for forensic disability services, and I just wonder if you're making a commitment there to investment for the needs of forensic disability.
Well, I'll go to this person tonight.
I'm not the Shadow Minister for Correctional Services, but my statement is certainly a clear commitment to respect the diversity of the South Australian population in the prison estate. And it's not just people with intellectual disability and people with psychiatric disabilities. It's also people with ageing conditions. Again, to give credit to the Labor government, there's a cottage-style unit installed in Hobart, which is that's accessible to people with disabilities and therefore including people with mobility issues as a result of ageing. We need to make sure that our prison estate can take all comers. I seem to recall recently there was a case where a judge decided not to incarcerate because the prison estate couldn't accommodate the person. And that's a justice issue. If that person deserved to be incarcerated, they should face the consequences. And I certainly take the attorney's point that particularly with psychiatric conditions, we do cross over between health and correctional services. But I do think that in many cases, people have moral accountability. They do know, even though they may have a lower level of functioning, it may fall below 770 IQ to deal with their person with intellectual disability. That doesn't mean that they don't know the difference between right and wrong. There are plenty of children who know the difference between right and wrong, but not otherwise.
Well, you heard Mr. Bain respects, but I don't know that's Attorney?
Well, I think I've said probably about as much as I can say about this, but there is a cohort of people in the prison system who are either by reason of birth or of acquired injury, very complex people to deal with. They are, in some cases, a danger to the community if they were to be released. And we get back to that philosophical issue again, are they to be seen through the prism of corrections or through the prism of disability? And it is because government is assembled, and not just this government, every government is assembled in a pattern of silos where health think about things from health point of view, corrections think about it from corrections point of view, police think about it from theirs. It's very, very difficult to, and not because there's no goodwill in the place, it's not the way the system is built. So it's quite a challenge to
Dr. Montanaro, President of the AMA.
Certainly the AMA would support forensic disability unit, and we'd call for that, and we would certainly call for the extra 10 beds at James Nash House. Having done the tour of James Nash House, I have to say that many of the people that are in James Nash do not leave space for what James Nash has intended, which is prisoners who have serious mental disability, and cycle those people through when their mental illness is in a more stable.
But can I say this, I've also been through there, and there are some people in there who, whilst in James Nash, and whilst in a situation where their medication is managed and their lives are structured by others, probably present little risk to anybody. But the decision to say that person is ready to go out into a less supervised environment of any sort is a big decision in some cases, because these individuals have quite entrenched illness matters that are very, very difficult